Madam Speaker, the critical failure coming from side affirmative is that none of their speakers has actually responded to the significant inconsistency that they have in their case. Number one is the consistency with age-based affirmative action in general. We have already pointed out to you, ladies and gentlemen, that voting or education, we make a presumption or an overarching assumption that in general children are immature, even though there could be some exceptions for the greater good of that cohort in general. Secondly, they have also been quite dismissive to the consistency with general mediating factors, because we all know that mediating factors in general are subjective and somewhat arbitrary, because poverty is also an arbitrary criteria. For those two reasons, we think that they haven't really satisfied any of their burden of proof, which is enough reason for you to vote against them. But I'm going to further extend their case to explain to you the importance of application of age-based segregation in the criminal justice system, being especially important. Because on a personal level, the future of these children, or the deprivation of the freedom of these children, are unsafe. And also at societal level, if rehabilitation of these young people fail, they will turn into criminals. That's why we think that we shouldn't take the marginal retribution benefit coming from their side of the house for this overarching important thing. Firstly, I'm going to engage to their retribution argument and tell you why this cannot be a good reason for you to vote for them. Secondly, I'm going to talk about why a selective judgment of maturity is extremely difficult, and therefore it is extremely dangerous for these children from being protected from over-punishment. And thirdly, I'm going to address the principle of mitigating factor. Now moving on to the first flashpoint. So they have said that victims' families are being dissatisfied because of the life punishment, and this is the problem. Two responses. Number one, in a realistic and comparative sense, victims and victims' families will be never satisfied, even if we apply the usual criminal justice system punishment. Because if we look at the news, for example, if I'm an adult rapist and I'm going to be sent to jail for 20 years, probably the victim's family, like the victim's father or mother, would say that I wanted death penalty for this person. We don't really think that they have made it clear to you that applying a usual punishment to these children would actually contribute to the satisfaction of the victim's family in a meaningful sense. Anyway, victim's family probably would not be satisfied from a realistic sense. That's why we don't really think that they have given you a tangible benefit. Secondly, the criminal justice system is already restrictive to revenge. The reason why the government does not allow personal revenge is because the government recognizes the need to balance out victims' feeling and compensation and all the other deterrence power and rehabilitation. That's why we have minimum and maximum sentencing requirements, which is defined by Congress regardless of the victim's feelings, or we also have mitigating factors, again, which they haven't really responded. That's why what I wanted to say from this response is that victims' feelings alone cannot be the reason to actually change how the criminal justice system treats a certain cohort of the demography. That's why their case already falls. Secondly, I'm going to talk about why selective judgment of maturity is extremely difficult. Again, two analyses here. Number one, it is quite problematic, ladies and gentlemen, from their side of the house, that they haven't really explained to you how the diagnosis process of maturity operates in a realistic sense. So I'm going to do that for you. So usually, when doctors diagnose immaturity, or for example, in the case of mental illness, this is done through an interview process by psychology doctors. From this, we can know that it is extremely difficult for a personal doctor to diagnose whether this person is immature or mentally ill. That's why, for example, in case of depression, it is extremely easy to get a certificate that you are a depressed person, and then you can leave from company. This happens because all of the interview is being done on a confession basis, and the subjective view of this doctor, even though if we have multiple doctors, it's overall subjective. This being the first analysis, I'm going to further explain to you why this is particularly problematic under today's specific context. So because there is a chain of perception manipulation by the society. Three reasons. Number one, in general, always the media tries to emphasize a criminal being a vile actor in a sensational way. For example, in Shonen A's cases, the media only focused on how abnormal this kid was by killing these children. The reason why, the actual empirical fact that we have to face is that the media sometimes dismisses the reality. For example, in TV, we see that elderly crime is exacerbating. while like the statistics shows that elderly crime is decreasing in terms of number. This clearly shows that the media's profit-seeking attitude, saying that they want to send interesting news to the society. That's why they overemphasize the meaning of single cases and act as if this is a representational case of all demography. With that, this is going to affect politicians and congressmen as a second actor, and also juries. That's why not taking a harder stance to criminals, including children, becomes a betrayal to the society because of that kind of manipulation by the media and how citizens see crimes in general and become more sympathetic to the victims. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, like combining these two analyses, it is extremely risky to rely on people who have to diagnose this maturity of children from a subjective point of view, because subjectivity can be manipulated and be swayed by the perceptions of the society very easily. That's why we think that it is very important to safeguard the well-being of these children by having a concrete rule. Lastly, I'm going to move on to the principle of mediating factor. So, again, the problem with their side of the house is that they have misunderstood what is being perfectly arbitrariness cannot be the direct reason to exclude this kind of factor from the criminal justice system, because we can see to the extent that mediation factor is not perfectly concrete, but there's absolutely no reason for their side to say that just because the linkage is not like 100% correlated, they have to exclude this factor. The good example is like poverty or like mental illness, because we already understand that poor people are not all poor people are criminals, or not all like mentally ill people don't recognize their responsibility. But we still have a generalistic assumption for the well-being of these children, for these people. That's why we don't really think that there was a good enough reason for them to say like, there was a significant logical jump between like being arbitrary and we should be able to exclude these kind of factors. For all these reasons, the motion should fall. Thank you.